Hey, it's Lynn Oz. It is January the 30th, 2014, and please bear with me as I make this video as I am still getting over my cold, so I'm quite stuffed up still. Now, I've got some information after doing some research on this snow issue. First, I'm going to address the black snow. Okay, so people are saying when they're heating up their snow, and I've seen it in video demos, that it's turning black. This is more than likely black carbon. Okay, it says in climatology, black carbon or BC is a climate forcing agent formed through the incomplete combustion of fossil fuels, biofuel, and biomass, and is emitted in both anthropogenic and naturally occurring soot. It consists of pure carbon in several linked forms. Black carbon warms the earth by absorbing heat in the atmosphere and by reducing albedo, the ability to reflect sunlight when deposited on snow and ice. So we know that black carbon in the atmosphere, for one, it is a toxin, it is a chemical, it's not good, but it does deposit itself on snow and ice. Now, so what's going on here is when you're taking a lighter or any flame and you're heating up snow that has a presence of a lot of carbon in it, or black carbon, you're going to see black. So that's why you're seeing black. So it depends on your area. If you have a lot of factories, if you have a lot of traffic and whatnot, you may have more of that. Now, I live in a suburban area and there is plenty of traffic around, but I did not have that black in my snow as you may have seen in my video I did. When I heated it up, it just disappeared. There was nothing black, but other people had black. The reason for that would be that you have a higher amount of black carbon in the area in which you live. Now we see here the influence on Earth's atmosphere. Most of the developments mentioned above relate to air quality in urban atmospheres. The first indications of the role of black carbon in a larger global context came from studies of the Arctic haze phenomena. Black carbon was identified as the Arctic haze aerosols by Rosen et al. And the Arctic snow by Clark and Noon. In general, aerosol particles can affect the radiation balance, leading to a cooling or heating effect, with the magnitude and sign of the temperature change largely dependent on aerosol optical properties, aerosol concentrations, and the albedo of the underlying surface. A purely scattering aerosol will reflect energy that would normally be absorbed by the Earth atmosphere system back to space and leads to a cooling effect. As one adds an absorbing component, the aerosol, it can lead to a heating of the Earth atmosphere system if the reflectivity of the underlying surface is sufficiently high. So they're talking mainly about aerosols here, but I'm trying to, there was something else I read. Here we go. It says soot is composed by a complex mixture of organic compounds which are weakly absorbing in the visible spectral region and a highly absorbing black component which is variously called elemental, graphitic, or black carbon. The term elemental carbon has been used. Now this is more than likely what the black stuff is you're seeing in the snow. There's two different types. I would say it's elemental carbon because it says the term elemental carbon has been used in conjunction with thermal and wet chemical determinations, and the term graphitic carbon suggests the presence of graphite-like microcrystalline structures in soot, as evidenced by Raman spectroscopy of Rosen and Novikov. The term black carbon is used to imply that the soot component is primarily responsible for the absorption of visible light, as shown by Yasa et al. At Rosen et al. For consistency in this article, the term black carbon is used as a synonym for both the elemental and graphic component of soot as suggested by Novikov. Let me correct there. They're telling you the term BC is used for black carbon. Now here it talks about black carbon and the presence in soils, and I'm assuming it would be the same for snow. It says up to 30% of the total carbon stored in soils is contributed by black carbon, especially for tropical soils especially for tropical soils, black carbon serves as a reservoir for nutrients. Experiments showed that soils without high amounts of black carbon are significantly less fertile than soils that contain black carbon. An example for this increased soil fertility are the terra preta soils of central Amazonia, which were presumably human-made by pre-Columbian native populations. Terra preta soils have on average 3 times higher soil organic matter, SOM, content, higher nutrient levels, and a better nutrient retention capacity than surrounding infertile soils. In this context, the slash and burn agricultural practice used in tropical regions does not only enhance productivity by releasing nutrients from the burned vegetation, but also by adding black carbon to the soil. Nonetheless, for a sustainable management, a slash and char practice would be better in order to prevent high emissions of CO2 and volatile black carbon. Furthermore, the positive effects of this type of agriculture are counteracted if used for large patches, so the soil erosion is not any more prevented by the vegetation. Now it says emission sources. Now this is what we're going to be interested in by region. Developed countries were once a primary source of black carbon emissions, but this began to change in the 1950s with the adoption of pollution control technologies in those countries. Whereas the United States emits about 21% of the world's CO2, it emits 6.1% of the world's soot. The European Union and United States might further reduce their black carbon emissions by accelerating implementation of black carbon regulations that currently take effect in 2015 or 2020 and by supporting the adoption of pending International Maritime Organization (IMO) regulations. Existing regulations also could be expanded to increase the use of clean diesel and clean coal technologies and to develop second-generation technologies. Today, the majority of black carbon emissions are from developing countries, and this trend is expected to increase. The largest source of black carbon are Asia, Latin America, and Africa. China and India together account for 25 to 35% of global black carbon emissions. Black carbon emissions from China doubled from 2000 to 2006. Existing and well-tested technologies used by developed countries such as clean diesel and clean coal could be transferred to developing countries to reduce their emissions. It says black carbon emissions peak close to major source regions and give rise to regional hotspots of black carbon induced atmospheric solar heating. Such hotspots include the Indo-Gangetic Plains in South Asia, eastern China, most of Southeast Asia, including Indonesia, regions of Africa between Sub-Sahara and South Africa, Mexico and Central America, and most of Brazil and Peru in South America. Approximately 3 billion people live in these hotspots. So, it says sources of black carbon. Let's see what those are. 42% open biomass burning. That would be forest and savanna burning. Now, we did have that, the huge fires going on out west that were like the worst ever. 18% residential biofuel burned with traditional technologies, 14% diesel engines for transportation, 10% diesel engines for industrial use, 10% from industrial processes and power generation, usually from smaller boilers, 6% residential coal burned and traditional technology. So it gives you the sources of these things, and there's some more information on that. So I can pretty well state here that what the people who are seeing black, so I'm looking at this, is talking about effects on the Arctic ice. Well, I'm curious to look into that. But we can pretty well be sure that those of you who are having the snow turn black is from black carbon. Let's see what this says real quick. The presence of black carbon over highly reflective surfaces such as snow and ice or clouds may cause a significant positive radiative forcing. The IPCC also notes that emissions from biomass burning, which usually have a negative forcing, have a positive forcing over snowfields in areas such as the Himalayas. According to this doctor, black carbon is a significant contributor to Arctic ice melt, and reducing such emissions may be the most efficient way to mitigate Arctic warming that we know of. The climate forcing due to snow and ice albedo change is of the order of 1.0 W/m square 2 at middle and high latitude in areas in the northern hemisphere and over the Arctic Ocean. The soot effect on snow albedo may be responsible for a quarter of observed global warming. Soot deposition increases surface melt on ice masses, and the meltwater spurs multiple radiative and dynamical feedback processes. Blah, 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 blah. Let's see. Carbon concentrations in the Arctic increase during the winter. Too bad it doesn't say anything about, when it's burning, but it says black carbon emissions from northern Eurasia, North America, and Asia have the greatest absolute impact on Arctic warming. However, black carbon emissions actually occurring within the Arctic have a disproportionately larger impact per particle on Arctic warming. So there's a lot of information here for you to look at. Now here's an example on a question answer forum about this mother who's worried because she had something in her dishwasher that was plastic, turned it black, and it stunk up her kitchen. Well, this guy writes, and he says, basically, hold on. Melted or burned plastic is essentially inert. The black is carbon, the same stuff that makes charcoal used to purify your drinking water, but I don't recommend eating it. Plastics, and it may have been polyvinyl chloride or it may have been polyethylene, both of which are commonly used in household plastics, are hydrocarbons. Okay, so it is a form of a carbon. So carbon or hydrocarbons can smell like burning plastic when they're heated. He goes on further. The contact with the heating element burned the plastic, causing it to char. I dare say that you can probably ignore the idea of getting the carbon off the element unless it is causing additional odors or taste in the dishwasher, which I doubt. And then he goes on to explain down here, where was it at? He talks about carbon a lot here. So more than likely, when you burn something that's high with black carbon, it's going to smell like burning plastic. Now, my snow smelled like burnt maple syrup plastic or something. Now, just because mine didn't turn black doesn't mean that there's not also carbon in it. So it didn't have like any blackness when I heated it. But I'm sure there's carbon in my snow as well, and that would be what is creating the smell. Now, on the whole subject of why when you let the snow sit, it melts, but if you burn it, it vaporizes. Now, as I said in my video that I made, snow can, when you heat it up, chemicals will burn, whereas the water won't. But I'm doing some research here, and what it says here is it is not possible for snow to burn combined with oxygen, but it is possible for it to vaporize without ever melting. It is called sublimation, and it is the way snow can change immediately to water vapor. So, for example, it just burns off in the sun. Perhaps this is what you were asking about. So this person asked this question. It does take just as much heat as it would if it changed to water, but it can happen even in sub-freezing temperatures. So it says it is for this reason that snow can actually disappear and not just pack down more and more. So just for fun, let's look up sublimation. It says sublimation is the transition of a substance directly from the solid to the gas phase without passing through an intermediate liquid phase. Sublimation is an endothermic phase transition that occurs at temperatures and pressures below a substance's triple point in its phase diagram. The reverse process of sublimation is desublimation or deposition. At normal pressures, most chemical compounds and elements possess three different states of different temperatures. In these cases, the transition from the solid to the gaseous state requires an intermediate liquid state. Note, however, that the pressure referred to here is the partial pressure of the substance, not the total pressure of the entire system. So all solids that possess an appreciable vapor pressure at a certain temperature usually can sublimate in air, water, ice just below 0 degrees Celsius. For some substances, such as carbon and arsenic, okay, so first they discussed the water and ice here, and I'm getting excited because I'm looking this up anew with you here. So they talk about the water and the ice, so we know about that. Now they're mentioning carbon. Well, we just read about carbon, black carbon. So it says for some substances such as carbon and arsenic, sublimation is much easier than evaporation from the melt because the pressure of their triple point is very high and it is difficult to obtain them as liquids. Okay, so There you go again about the carbon. Now we know why as well. When you heat the snow with a lighter, it's going to evaporate because that heat, especially with an open flame, that heat is so strong. Hey, you know what? I don't mind being wrong. And to show you this, I'm making this video because I wanted to find out. So while I believe that there is some very toxic stuff in our snow because we have a lot of contamination, we have chemtrails, and those things are real, and our snow is very contaminated, at the same time, what we're experiencing with the snow, I mean, when until recently did people just sit around and burn snow? You know what I mean? So people probably didn't sit around and think to burn snow 10 years ago because we weren't into all this conspiracy stuff. But now we're sitting here with our lighters with nothing better to do, burning snow. So it looks like this whole snow situation is being blown out of proportion. The reason it's turning black in some areas and not in others is because you have higher black carbon in your air. Okay. The reason that the snow, when you're burning it, is not really melting, you're not seeing any liquid, is because it is doing this thing called sublimation. It's bypassing the liquid stage altogether and being turned into a gas. It's just basically vaporizing into the air. All right. So that's the reason for that. Now, I left that snow sit on a plate, did a couple things, and went back, and it melted on the plate normally. Okay. So there's no reason to worry about the snow. Don't eat it. Shouldn't let your kids eat it or anything like that because snow is always dirty, just like we shouldn't drink rainwater, especially if you live in a city. If you live way out in the country, that might be different. Check into it. But false alarm on this whole snow issue. Okay? Thanks and God bless you.